If you're a high-achieving woman who's exhausted by stress, stuck in constant conflict, and tired of being overlooked in the exact rooms where you know you were born to lead, then this podcast is for you. So here's your host, Pallavi Jain.
Welcome to Her Boss Brain. I'm your host and your friend, Pallavi. Over the last few episodes, we have been diving into our inner technology, how our brain works, body and mind, actually all of that, how that comes together, and how that shapes our real resilience and well-being. Then we pivoted into relationships, that third leg of resilience and how to build harmony from within. But here's the thing. What happens when harmony breaks? When someone or something pushes the right buttons and suddenly the calm, conscious version of us goes poof. You know that feeling, right? One minute you're composed, the next your inner technology is doing a wobbly dance in every direction. So, how do we stay centered when the outside world shakes us? And what are the right tools we can consciously use? And that's what we'll unpack today. And I'm thrilled to welcome our guest for today, Dethra Giles, a powerhouse in helping leaders turn tension into clarity. Dethra helps Fortune 500 companies, leaders, startups, and teams transform how they show up, speak up, and lead across lines of power, perspective, and difference. She's the voice organizations call when communication breaks down and culture is on the line. With a background in leadership development, OD, and conflict navigation, she delivers infrastructure for people who work together when the stakes are high. Her proprietary frameworks, including the award winning DARE model, I'm so excited to dive in, have helped thousands of professionals master difficult conversations, navigate change, and turn tension into clarity. And when she's not on stage or advising the C suite, Deetra is teaching the world how to master conflict with conversational competence in her book. That's Not What I Said. I love the title. Oh my God. Can't wait to get into all of that. But first of all, we are so thrilled to have you here. Welcome, Deetra.
It is a pleasure to be here with you all. And slight correction, my last name is Giles, like Jim and giraffe.
Deetra Giles. There
Yes.
you go. So let's start with this. One word that describes how you feel right now. We like to be come in here with intentionality. So what's one word that comes to your mind right now?
Oh, overwhelmed.
Ooh,
Yeah, I know, but in a good way. I think we don't recognize that words often have negative connotations, but that's not the actual definition of that word. And so it's just overwhelmed by surprise, by the outreach of people, by the love that people are embracing, my friends who are embracing my book and having these book signings all over the world. So it's just overwhelmed.
very nice. And that's a word that we hear so often, and I say it so often. But there's so much I want to unpack with you. But before we dive into that, I'm wondering, what's your story? Because, I have found for me and so many women I work with, transformation rarely comes from a big one day I decided moment. It's the small, real moments when life holds up a mirror and you can't look away. So, is Deethra we see today always like this, or was always like this, or was there an organic evolution of you that shifted how you see, do, or communicate things today, right? What's your story?
For me, it's not an either or, it's a yes and. So part of it is I have kind of always been some version of this person. One of the things
Yes.
I tell people is I have always had audacity. People will look at me and say, "Oh my gosh, I love your confidence." And I'm like, "You don't love my confidence, you love my audacity." And I've had that from a very young child. I often tell a story of when I was 6 years old, my mother went into the army to basically make a better life for us. But to do that, she had to leave me with my aunt. And my aunt one day told me to clean up a mess that I didn't make. And I looked at my aunt and said, "I'm not doing that. I refuse to do it." And back in my day, physical discipline was a form of correction. And so I got physical discipline. And even after that, I still refused it. And my aunt looked at me and said, "Who do you think you are?" And at 6 years old, I looked back at her and said, "Not the person that's going to clean up that mess."
That's
So
crazy.
I, I,
Wow.
I've been audacious my whole life, but I was audacious without direction. And that has been the
Yes.
evolution. That has been the thing that has guided me. It's been taking that audacity and giving it confidence because confidence is based on data, it's based on knowing and giving it the true knowledge that the audacity needed to be earned to have. So that has been the evolution. But the audacious me, the one that would wear a head wrap, the one that wears vibrant colors on stage, the one that goes into a business meeting with
Yep.
everyone dressed in navy blue, black, and gray and khaki with a
Yeah.
bright yellow suit on, that person has always been there.
Well, I have to say, we love the Dethra we see today. And like they always say, there's always an evolution. And thank you so much for sharing such a personal and heartfelt, background and the story that you shared with us, because I think it's important for women of today also to see that, there's always a reason behind what's really happening, and the evolution of you is always happening. And it's interesting you mentioned the word audacity, because that was one word that really sparked my interest. And I love the word that, even on your LinkedIn profile, it says Audacity Broker. So in my own work, when I'm helping women lead from within, I often say, you can't be authentic without a dose of audacity, because being yourself fully unapologetically is one of the bravest things you can do, right? So,
Absolutely.
how would you define this audacity broker, and how do you help women do this?
So one of the things I say, I've said before in a talk that I gave, is that there are people half as good as you with 10 times your audacity navigating the world, taking up the space that you should be taking up. And the reason
So
I call
true.
it the Audacity Broker is because I say people are out here acting like there was a Black Friday sale on Audacity and they bought
Yeah.
two lifetime supplies.
Oh my
And
God. Yeah.
it means that people know how to get it, and the people who should have it don't. And my thing
Mm,
is, you know what? I'm your broker. I am not here to sell it to you. I'm to remind you that you already own it and how to use it productively. So that's
wow.
why I call myself the Audacity Broker, because in my work, my background is human resources. I go into major organizations like Louis Vuitton, Kaiser Permanente, the NBA, and help them optimize the performance of their people. And the biggest thing I see in that lack of performance optimization is people just don't have the audacity to do and say what they actually know.
Yeah. That is so true. And, I know you and I connected first because of our HR background, and how, the work that you're doing right now really sparked my interest, because, I see that every day in organizations as I was an HR leader. And now that I'm training and, doing workshops for these organizations, that some obvious things are not that obvious for people. And I know your approach is bold, insightful, and always rooted in the belief that culture is not what you say, which we both have seen a lot in our, tenure, but it's how you communicate, lead, and live it out, how you say it. So
Really.
could you share with our audience an example? Because I think that really helps us anchor when we see that in real life, how does that show up? So if you can give us an example of maybe one of your client who made that shift, and how did they do that? Because I feel a lot of times we all know what to do. And, that's part of core work of, my workshops, where I try to be a little bit different. And I know your work is the same, that we're showing how to do it, not just what to do, but how to do it.
So I remember one client, this very recent client, when they came to me, they are brilliant. I mean, one
Yeah.
of the leading researchers in the world, and not just by my standards, because I know this person, they're brilliant, but by the world standards, people are reaching out to them. But what they noticed was my brilliance only gets me to be a doer on the project, not a leader on the project. So everyone wanted them on their team to do the work, to do this research.
Yeah.
PhD, bright
Yeah.
mind, PhD, MD. I mean, brilliant,
Wow.
but was stuck because they weren't audacious enough to speak up in meetings. And so when things were being planned, everyone was planning around them and for them, but not with them. Everyone
Oh,
kept getting promoted and they got tired of it. Wait a minute, I'm tired of being called around the world to work on projects. I want to be called to lead projects. And so I had to teach them how to become comfortable with their discomfort and speaking up. And it started small. I tell them, you don't wake up one day and run a marathon. You
yeah.
start off with a quarter mile,
Yep.
and then you start off just walking the quarter mile. And then you might get to jogging the quarter mile. And then you run the quarter mile before you add a half a mile. And so we
Yep.
started small. And then one day from that small step, they spoke up in a meeting and the meeting went silent because they spoke up and they thought, you know what, have I made a mistake? Why is no one talking? And
Oh my
then
goodness.
this key leader that has led several meetings, that projects that this person has been on literally around the world, said, I have been waiting 10 years for you to open your mouth.
You kidding me?
They said to this person in the meeting in front of everyone, I have been waiting 10 years for
Oh
you
my
to
goodness.
open your mouth.
It's crazy.
And from there, career just went through I mean, they made leaps and bounds because all they needed to know is that you were able to lead because they know you have the expertise. And when I say
Yes.
around the world, this person has literally done their work in over 80 countries.
Yeah.
That's how prominent of a researcher this person is. And all they said was, I've been waiting for 10 years for you to open your mouth.
This is so interesting. And thank you for sharing this story because it's so important here to actually pause for a second and think of what you just said, because I have been saying this for a very long time, and now people you're hearing right directly from Dethra. She's saying the same thing. It's the small actions in these micro moments that actually sets you apart. And I always say, like, with the audacity or confidence, what that you have to be confident in your own skin, in your own authentic way of who you are, right? And when you take these small steps and you see wins and you see people responding to that, the ripple effect of that confidence is tenfold, because next time that's going to give you so much more confidence to take the very next step and say, oh, actually that worked, right?
Yeah. And for me, that's why I add the audacity component in it. Because what I tell people the difference for me is confidence is personal, audacity is public. And so
Yes.
it's about being audacious before you build that confidence because audacity is action. When people see me wearing a crazy outfit, they don't know if I'm confident.
Yeah.
They don't know how I feel in that outfit, but what they know is I was audacious enough to wear it. So audacity is a behavior, and oftentimes your mindset and your thinking has to catch up with your behavior. And that's what I teach people. Behave and what you think will catch up. And we do this in all of our work. I tell people even as I navigate the world, do you care what people think of you? No, I just care how you treat me. Let your thoughts catch up with your behavior, but here is how I want to be treated, and that's what I can dictate, right? And so that's why I love that audacity component, how I ended up shifting to the Audacity Broker, because I'm like, sometimes your thoughts and thinking may not be there, but if I can teach you to behave, I can get your thinking to catch up.
Is golden. Okay. I'm going to again pause for a second and repeat that for our listeners, that confidence is personal and audacity is public. It's how you show up for those people, your behavior, right? The outward thing that people see. And those are two different things. And if they're aligned, beautiful. But if they are not aligned, even then you can do certain things in life and get to certain success in your life when you're audacious enough to actually show up the way people want you to show up, right? It's a personal brand you're creating consciously or unconsciously. Okay, so that's a great segue. Actually, that reminds me of, so we talk here a lot about my ATM framework. And I know you and I have talked about, but it's basically, how you take charge of your current moment and how you kind of feel the empowerment within you. So it's arrive in the present moment, take responsibility to know what truly matters to you. And then M stands for making a conscious choice. So we have been talking about making a conscious choice, right? But when I heard about your DARE model, I immediately felt that they complemented each other in many ways, because the journey starts within and then it shows outside. And if you can be in alignment, then you're not exhausted, or you're not like, at the end of the day, if there is something you're doing that you're not loving or you're not in alignment with your inner, it is going to kind of burn you out at some point. So can you walk us through how the dare works in the moments that really test us, those real life situations that get tricky?
Yes, and let me tell you why I love being on this podcast, especially about her boss brain, because oftentimes people see this as a model, but this model is based on real brain science and brain work. And so I'll back up a little bit before I jump into the DARE model.
Yes.
The reason I created this model was because I would watch people try to navigate conflict at an aroused state as if their brain was functioning properly. And you
Yep.
all know this, and I know your listeners know this because you've all worked through this. But when you're in this aroused state, i.e., conflict, your brain thinks, I am in a fight.
Yep.
There is danger. And it goes into the four things you do: the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? What
Yep.
that really means for us in layman's term is the thinking part of your brain, that prefrontal cortex, has shut down. It is like, I'm out of here. I don't do this, right? The hard thing for us is the thing that you need the most, the part of your brain that you need the most
You
when
know,
you are
right?
in conflict. is the part that's like, I don't do arousal. I'm out of here. And
Yep.
so that's why we struggle. That's why sometimes when you were in an argument, you can say, I was so mad I couldn't even think. And we think that's hyperbole, but it's actually true. The thinking
Yep.
part of your brain shut down. And so what I did was after dealing with conflicts, whether it was in negotiations where I helped with negotiations or in mergers and acquisitions with companies, or even in court systems where I was a divorce mediator, helping people mediate divorces, I
Right.
realized people need a tool that's easily accessible by their limbic system. That's that part that's
Yes.
like, I am not the thinker, I'm the fighter. I'm either going to fight, or freeze. That's what I do.
Yep.
And so, what easy tool can I give them to store there so when the thinking part of their brain shuts down, they can access this, not to think, but to give their prefrontal cortex time to say,
Time
okay,
to
it's
come
safe
back.
enough for me to come back online,
Yep. Yep.
right?
I get
And
it. Yep.
yeah, and what psychology teaches us is that if people have a formula, they are more likely to attempt it because a formula increases your likelihood of success. And so, and it teaches us anything more than 4 steps is too much, the brain gets back to arousal. So I knew I had to make it between 2 and 4 steps and make it easy to remember. And that's how I came up with the DARE model: describe, acknowledge, review, and engage. So when you're in a conflict, you do these 4 things: describe versus interpret, acknowledge similarities without minimizing differences, review the narratives you have accepted as fact, and engage for conversation and not for conversion. Those are
Love
the
it.
easy 4 steps: describe, acknowledge, review, and engage.
Wow, beautiful. And like you said, it's so powerful because in those moments when you can't think, if there is something, and if you, so there is another thing, and tell me if that helps. So even for with ATM, what I try to tell people, the first step is the hardest, right? Arriving in the present moment because you're
Yeah.
coming back out of the cycle. So there is a conscious effort that's needed. But what I tell them is that if you do it for simple things in your life,
Yes.
so do it for small, 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 small little things that doesn't even matter sometimes. But the more you do it, you are literally creating these new neural pathways in your brain where it's now going to be an automatic response. Like it's an automatic response if my son spills the milk and I'm going to scream at him. That was an automatic response I learned over the years. Now the new response could be, okay, I'm going to apply anything triggering that happens, I'm going to apply the ATM. And you come to the first, so it's the repetitiveness of the formula that you have, and you start applying in those small moments, and you will literally train your brain to eventually apply it in situations that actually matter. Do you agree with that?
100%. I tell people this all the time. It's easier to create a new habit than stop an old habit. And basically,
Yes.
it's exactly what you said. So the layman's term of it is it's hard to break an old habit, start a new habit.
Yes.
The brain science of is you need to create a new neural pathway because you can't shut off an old pathway, right?
Yes.
And I tell people that when they hear this model, the DARE model, they're immediately like, oh my gosh, you're going to save my life and my marriage. I'm going to go home and apply this to the toughest, roughest conflict I have. And I'm like, wait, no,
Don't do
pump
that.
the brakes. Start small, because if you do this, because you haven't lived with the model enough for it to be stored in your brain, to be, and you're building a new neural pathway. You have not built a new neural
Yes.
pathway. And so, like you said, start off small. Oh, are we going to go to this restaurant or that restaurant? Low stakes debate,
Yes.
start there.
Yeah.
Oh, I was in line. Normally I would let someone jump in line in front of me without speaking up for myself. Low stakes conflict, start there until you build up the habit of using this tool and then take it to higher stakes. It's like the marathon all over again. You don't start with a marathon, you start with your quarter mile and you're just walking.
Absolutely. Baby steps and consistency.
Yeah.
That is the magic, I think, solution, at least for me in my life. I mean, that's what I did. And that changed, pivoted so many of my relationships and how I show up in these, as a leader, as a mom, as a person. So, we know that how we show up in every conversation matters, and especially the ones that matters. What do you do personally, Deetra, to anchor yourself before any conversation? What is the Deetra formula?
So here's the funny thing. I tell people I am the mad scientist that has tried all the experiments on themselves first. That's why I have my tick. I have a thing called where I get my tick from. But I've tried all this on myself before I tried it on other people. So I actually have lived with the DARE model long before I gave it to others to try. So I use the DARE model, and my background is not one of conversational competence. It was something I had to learn. I learned it, I began the journey for conversational competence when I was an undergrad. And it came from actually my husband, my boyfriend then, my now husband, who grew up in a very, peaceful home. His parents never raised their voices at each other in front of them. And
Yeah.
that was not my upbringing. We were a loud family. We had arguments. We had very passionate, loud arguments, and we knew how to use our words to slice people up.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
my upbringing. And I
Two
remember
very different sides
very
of the coin.
different upbringings. And so I remember us dating, and I tell people this all the time. I don't remember what we were arguing about, but I remember this day very vividly because it was our first real argument, and I raised my voice. And my boyfriend at the time, my now husband, looked at me like I had 50 heads and they were all spinning simultaneously.
My
And
God.
he looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I paused and said, "We're arguing." And he said, "Not like that.
Yeah.
We don't raise our voices at each other. We can do this without being disrespectful." When I tell you the whole argument went away and I leaned in and said, Tell me more about this.
Oh my
How
God.
do you do that? How do
Yeah.
you how do you disagree vehemently
Yeah.
and not have this whole
The
situation
temper and the anger and yeah.
and where we're throwing hurtful words at each other in the hopes that you'll forgive me after this is over for what I said. How? Tell me more. And that began my journey of conversational competence. And to this day, we've been together for 27 years, been married for 24 of those years, and we do not yell at each other. We disagree
Awesome.
vehemently. I mean, we have passionate disagreements and we do not raise our voices. We do not say hurtful things. My husband has never called me out of my name, and I have never called him out of his name. And our children have only watched us have effective and productive conflict. We don't avoid conflict, we
Yeah.
address it, but we
Yeah.
address it using our DARE model. We address it respectfully.
I love that. And I'm just thinking, because we teach all this science, so I'm thinking all of that was must be going in your head when, you had to pivot and kind of change each other's, not change, but actually accept each other the way you are and kind of adjust how you are showing up for one another. Could you tell us like how did it felt inside? Because I think for a lot of women here and a lot of us, right, we are trying to evolve, we're trying to become a better version of yourself, and the people around us help us to do that, right? So was it really hard, like in your brain? Because again, you're wired for a certain way of a certain behavior. And sometimes I also, or it could work the completely opposite because now you're not getting the trigger from the other person. So does it diffuses the situation in your head too? So, right? Can you see it could go both ways?
And here's what I tell people: it desire combined with solutions make
Yes.
things happen, right? And so here, what my thing was, I had a desire. I knew even growing up, though that was where I raised, I got that. And you know how this is. Some of these are formulated by the time you're 6 years old. Some of this is foundational. Now that's a part,
Yes.
the core of who you
Yes.
are. And so by six, I learned, oh, when we disagree, we raise our voices, we say hurtful things. This is how you, I learned when the argument, I learned you either shut down or
Yep.
you go
Or
all
you
in. I
scream.
was,
Yeah.
I was the go all in kind, right?
Yeah.
And I learned that by 6 years old. But here
Hmm.
is what I also learned. I learned that I did not like that. I did not like saying hurtful things. I did not like hearing hurtful things towards me. And so when the solution showed up of we can still disagree, but I also knew I was not going to be walked over or shut down.
Yeah.
And the only option I learned was you scream until you are heard. But when I found a solution, him saying, hey, we can disagree and have these arguments, but not do it this way, which is why I don't remember what we were arguing about, but I remember that moment because I immediately paused, leaned in, and all I said was, tell me more.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And
Right. And so it's about the desire. The desire was there to not have that. And so you're right. My natural inclination is still, but I've been curving that for so long that I catch the thought before it becomes a behavior. Right.
yes,
And so I know, Deetra, wait 5 seconds before you respond. And now, because I've trained myself so well, my just like everyone else, the brain works the way it works for everyone. None
exactly.
of us escapes it. So my
Yeah,
prefrontal cortex shuts down too, but now I've trained it so well, it shuts down for 5 seconds instead of 2 minutes.
that
Right? That
that
five
that makes
seconds
sense.
back online. Now I'm able to say, oh, 5 seconds, breathe. Now I can respond. And to the person experiencing it, they don't see a 5 second, pause. All they see is she's thinking about what she's
She's
about
thinking
to
about it.
say
Yeah.
before she flies off the handle. And they never see a fly off the handle, even though in my mind I had a 5 second fly off the handle.
No, that makes perfect sense. And it's, I think, again, personalizing what works for you. But, this brings me, I'm just reminded of, as you say that, I'm picturing something I often share with my clients when, you're off center. It's like your inner compass spinning in circles. It's like you can't tell what's true north, what's you, what's your emotion in that moment. And when you pause, and you just arrive in that present moment and you breathe, you're able to reconnect to yourself. That compass slowly steadies, which is kind of what you're doing in that 5 or 10, 15 seconds, how long, depending on the situation. And suddenly, then I believe I have experienced it. You know what to say, you know how to say it, which is the most important thing, how to say it, and what is it that really matters in this situation. And I know it's easier said than done, right? But it's that pause that rewires your power. That's the power of standing in your own alignment before stepping into a conversation, even, right? And I know, so you have touched on this a little bit, but I would want to bring this back for our listeners is that, in our one of our previous episodes, we talked about how perception tricks our brain,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is how we don't see people as they are, but as our memory recordings make us believe they are. So that plays out so much in conflict, doesn't it? Like, I feel half of the conflict is because of that perception.
And that's why the first step in the model is describe
Exactly.
versus interpret. Because
Yes.
oftentimes we're in a conflict, like you said. What I tell people in my training sessions when I'm working with organizations implementing this as a part of their culture, I tell them every piece of data that you receive goes through a filter before it comes out. The problem and where conflict arises is I don't know what your filter is, and you don't
Yes.
know what my filter is. And so we may be saying the same word, but meaning very different things. An example I give people is when I'm in an audience, I throw out the word always. I ask them, what percent of the, when you say always, what percent of the time is that for you? And before you say 100, that is not what you mean. And when
Yeah.
I'm in the audience, I get everything from 90%. And the other day I did a session and it was as low. This person said 35% of the time is always to them.
My goodness.
Now, mind you, you have two people using the same word. One person says, I always need you to do that for me. They mean 95%, and the person hearing it hears
Means 35%.
35%. Now, we are having a massive argument and we don't know why because
Yeah.
we are interpreting the same word and not describing what we mean.
I love that. This reminds me of my kids. It's like, I never get this. I always, whatever. So that's so typical. But, what we're getting back to, which is also, I think, the core of both of our models, if you really look at it, is that in your experience, how does a leader's own mindset and inner clarity influence the way they navigate conflict or cultural breakdown? So even if we come down to the culture now, because I feel like leaders have this additional responsibility of creating the right culture where how they are showing up. And I know culture is not made by one person, it's everybody in the organization, but how much would you say like your own mindset and that inner clarity matters in creating that culture that actually people love being in and where people thrive?
Yeah, I do think culture is everyone's job, but leaders are culture curators, right?
Exactly.
So leaders kind of set the tone for what the culture is going to be. And if you are a conversationally competent leader, it trickles down. And people will
Yeah.
often ask me, Dietrich, what do I do when I learned the DARE model and the people that I'm working with haven't? And I was like, they don't need to. Because they follow behavior. I don't need you out there in the world having a conversation and pausing and saying, okay, D, describe versus interpret. I need you walking. When I'm out using this model, I use it flawlessly and fluently. I don't go out and say, hey, I'm using the DARE model on you right now. But people will model my behavior as the leader. So when I'm in an argument and or a conflict and people are saying something, I stop and say, wait a minute. That's not the same thing I got from that information. Can we step back and just say what the information actually was before we start talking about what we made it mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's describe versus interpret. They don't have to know that's what I'm doing. All they need to know is, okay, wait a minute. We're taking a pause here and stepping back to make sure that we're starting from the same foundation, right? And so that's what leaders do. Leaders teach from their actions, not just their words, because their words really mean nothing.
And that makes so much sense because, like, even when, we're doing the lead from within for building harmonious relationships, right? I often tell people, like, to keep in mind, like, even the conflict management, I teach them these 4 steps in these conflicting situations. And the first is based on knowing the difference between facts and opinion,
Yeah.
of just stating the facts, not saying what did you observe, what was the fact of the situation. Even as an HR person, when we were doing employee relations all the time, it was all about evaluation. It was not about, okay, the manager is upset about with something that their team did and they want me to take certain action, and they're telling me is evaluation, no facts or what really happened. And sometimes they don't even know what happened. It's just their own amygdala and all of that they were having an emotional reaction to something somebody said. And like you said, they didn't even understand. They interpreted it in a certain way, which it was not even meant, in that situation. And that brings us to your book, to the title of your book. So, first of all, you literally had me there with the title. That's not what I said. So often we say that, so often we hear it as HR professional. Oh my God, how many times I've heard that. So, talk to us why that title and what is this book about?
So, I told you all I did negotiations, mediations, all that stuff, conflict management. I have
Yes.
an advanced degree in conflict management. And so I would say out of all the conflicts I've had to be involved in, that's not what I said is the most heard comment of them all. Because here's the thing, people respond to, again, their interpretation of what you said, not your actual words. And so when someone responds to their interpretation, that's the initial response. That is not what I said. I said X, Y, and Z, but you heard A, B, and C. I'll give you a prime example. I was raised in a military household. My mother was military. So I learned to be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late. To be late is to be left. And to be late is disrespectful. That's what I learned. So when someone shows up late, my mind interprets that as disrespect,
Disrespect. Yep, I'm the
right?
same way.
And it's
It has
crazy.
happened to me so many times. Like, punctuality is one of my thing. Like, we both were so early, even for this recording. I've never had a lot of host guests actually do that, but that's kind of what you're saying. That's my definition of punctuality.
Right, that's my definition of punctuality is being early. And here's the funny thing. I was actually sitting here well before I pressed the button to log in, but I was like, I don't want to be too early
I
and
did
make her
the
think I'm
same thing.
crazy. So I'll sit here a little while. And I had to
Yep,
press it. I was like, okay, so 10 minutes early should be okay. And I'll log in. But I was here 30 minutes before we started.
yep, yep.
Right. And so but however, when someone says, oh, I'll be a little late, and I was actually this happened the other day, and they said the thing starts at 6 o'clock. I know I'm going to be there at 5:30, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about me. I'll be a little late." And what I said to them, oh, and because mind you, I teach this stuff, and I still get it wrong sometimes.
Right.
I said, "Oh, so you're going to plan ahead of time to be disrespectful?" And she said, "That's not what I said. I said I was going to be 10 minutes late." And I stepped back and I was like, you're right. You're going to be 10 minutes late. And normal people would say, well, Deetra, the thing to do is to ask, well, why are you going to be late?
Yeah,
No, the thing to do is to ask yourself, does it really matter?
I was just going to
I
say that.
asked myself, This was a networking event. It was a
Yeah.
gathering. People will be coming
Mhm.
between the time it started and maybe 10 minutes before it finished. Her being 10 minutes late was not disrespectful. It was not a big deal. And when you ask the question of yourself, you can assess that's why describe versus interpret is so important, because it
Yeah.
now tells you how to navigate and strategize for the rest of this conflict, which is why I tell people I don't use the word conflict resolution. I use the word conflict management because so many conflicts are not to be resolved, they're just to
Yep.
be managed. Right? My own internal conflict is being late is disrespectful. That's something I will have to manage because that's a foundational thing in my head from when I was a child. I'm
Yeah.
not going to change that.
Right.
That's between me. I will manage it because sometimes it is disrespectful. And other times, Deetra, come on now. You are being very extra and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and I think for me that is so true. And you said the right thing there that actually I try to be very intentional about is what is it that really matters here? Because I think we often lose the sight of that in our own triggers and the emotional reaction we're having for something, which is the whole, your brain is kind of, not in sync or not in integration, thinking what is it that really matters? But you mentioned one more thing here, which kind of reminded me of something like, in this I feel like in this polarized world where everyone feels like they're walking on eggshells, right? How can we actually encourage leaders to have real conversations without the fear of being canceled out or misunderstood? Because that happens with some of, when I am coaching and when I'm working with some of these leaders, they are afraid to be authentic. They don't want to be misinterpreted. And then, they're constantly saying, that's not what I said. So do you have any tools, any tips, any mindset kind of, because I work on a lot of their mindset, but if you have any external tools and things that they could use, they need it.
Yes. And this was one of the reasons I created the DARE model, right? To give people that process they can walk through when they feel like stakes are high. It's the way you hold the room when the conversation feels impossible.
Yeah.
And so when you start with this model, you can step back and say, describe versus interpret. I need to state the facts here. And all in this phase, this is the phase where you ask the most questions. One
Mm,
of the things I tell my students is when you make a statement, you are setting up for an argument. But when you ask a question, you are setting up for a conversation. Where we get canceled so much is that we make a lot of statements without getting our foundation solid. And so in this
I
phase,
love
I'm
that.
asking true questions, questions that are sincere and inquisitive on my part. Here's the hard thing. People will say I'm asking questions, but what they're
Yeah.
doing is making statements and putting question marks at the end of them.
Yeah. Give us an example.
Great question. So one example is when I tell one of my mentors told me this, so I won't take full credit for creating it, but I use it quite often. If you can answer your question with the word idiot, you did not ask a question. For example, what were you thinking? In your head, you're saying idiot. That is not a question, that's a statement. Why does it matter? Here's the thing about that one. You don't answer that one with the word idiot, but you already have an answer in your head. And the real question that you're asking is to make them think about it, not so that you can gather information to impact your outcome, right? And
I
so
love
those
that.
are two things. If you can answer with the word idiot, what were you thinking? Or if you're trying to change them and not gather information for you, i.e., why did you do it that way?
I love that. I love
Right.
it.
So your intent tells you if I am truly asking a question or if I'm casting blame and need them to change.
Yep. That is so powerful. I'm gonna actually use that and steal it
Yes.
from you.
And so that's the first part for leaders. And now when we're using the same data, I can ask, okay, we agree on the data. Tell me how you interpreted that data, right? We
Yes.
see this
Yes.
around like couples with finances. You have one couple that grew up, one person and a couple that may have grown up affluent. And so they feel like if our account is below $100,000, we're on the borderline of being houseless. We're on the borderline of being unhoused and we may never eat again. You have one person that grew up maybe in poverty and they see an account with $100,000 and thinking, oh my gosh, we are about to be Bill Gates.
Exactly.
And now they're
Exactly.
arguing about money, looking at the same number. Okay, let's start. Both of us have, we both see that this account has $100,000, right? What does that mean to you? Well, for
Yep.
me, it means we are in trouble financially. Oh, well, for me, it means we are doing great. Cool. So, what does it mean for the actual bills that we have, for the lifestyle we want? Let's now add our outflow. What are our bills coming in, and what do we want to, what kind of life do we want to live? Now we can put on top of that, okay, now that we have this foundation, what does $100,000 mean to that? Oh, wait, you know what? The person who grew up in poverty that thought that was a lot of money realized, wait a minute, we have $90,000 worth of bills. We
Exactly.
don't have $100,000. We have $10,000. And now that changes my perspective on what this means financially, right? And
No,
so
that makes sense.
that foundation of fact, then we can start to work around what we make that mean.
That makes so much sense. And I think that reminds me of another thing that I often say, and we actually touched with another guest, Karen, who kind of talks about storytelling, that data doesn't change behavior, it's emotions that do. And second, it really matters how you interpret the data and what are you really seeing in the data. Data is just data. So
It-
it's so important to sometimes connect. So for all our executive women here who are listening to this, if you are presenting something to the board, if you are in those meetings, that high stake meetings where data matters, where you're trying to shift behavior or you're trying to shift action or some kind of conversation in the room, it is very, very critical how you're relating data to, first of all, emotions, and how you are interpreting it and how you're making it clear what does that data mean. And sometimes you have to connect those dots for people because everybody, as we have been talking in this episode, everybody have their own interpretation of how they interpret words, how they interpret data. So it's very important to connect those dots for people.
And I will tell people always connect the dots.
Yes.
Without connecting the dots, we are relying on understanding the other person's filter,
Yep. Yep.
right? And I
Absolutely.
don't understand your filter. And we're relying on your yes means that you understood what I intended. And I have no way of knowing that. And that's where arguments lie. And so I'm always saying, hey, connect the dots. Or even if it's not me connecting the dots for you, asking, tell me what that means for you.
Yeah.
Help me understand how you are interpreting that data. Help me understand, walk me through how you plan to apply this so that I do know we're on the same page. Because I give the definition that I use for effective communication is when the giver gives the receiver information and the receiver does what the giver intended, not what they said, but what they
I see.
intended.
Yes.
That means connect the dots because I don't know, I can't assure that you understand what I intended unless I tell you clearly.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And what would you say in that effective communication? What is the number one mistake, other than what we just talked about, the leaders make when, communication doesn't kind of land where it needs to be or it's not effective?
Walking away without clarity. We walk away assuming that people understood, that we all understood because we all in this meeting, we are speaking the same language. And so you heard my words and you know what those words mean instead of getting clarity.
Yep.
I, so I watched a meeting go. I watched a meeting that I knew was going to fail, and at the end, I stopped them before they left and said, "Hey, this meeting is not going. This meeting is going to end well, but the outcome is not."
Yeah.
So the one example in the meeting, the leader said, "I need those reports by tomorrow,"
Yeah.
and everyone said, "Done." I watched that happen. Everybody went on. Okay, you all get together and split out the work. Everybody got it. We can do that. And everything was so vague. Everyone was agreeing to it. And before the meeting ended, okay, we're done. I said, I know I'm just an observer. I know I'm a consultant. I know I'm stepping
Yep.
out of my lane. But do you
Yep.
mind if I ask a few questions before we leave just to get some clarity on my side? Exactly when are those reports due tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
And then one person said, oh, by the end of the day. And the leader said, oh, no, no, no. I have to get my report to the other person by the end of the day. I need it no later than 12 o'clock.
Wow. Yeah.
Just one question changed everything. And I could see, I'm like, this is going to be a disaster. Tomorrow, somebody is going to get fussed at, written up, all because a leader did not make sure there was clarity before we left the room.
It's the assumptions, right? It's assuming they understood. It's the lack of time, many times, lack of intent of, okay, it takes 1 microsecond to ask that question to make sure there is clarity, But, I also feel our neuroscience tells us that our brain literally shuts down empathy under stress,
Yes.
right? So, and that's why, I work a lot with leaders on moving them from that stress and exhaustion by making them understand about the neuroscience, and really, because I feel like if you don't know how a technology works, you can't use it to your advantage. So you need to learn how this works so you can actually use it. We've been talking about how you have leveraged certain tools, techniques, tricks for you, because this is how it works. This is what I'm going to do, right? I know how it works now. So what are your favorite ways to help leaders regulate and help them get out of that exhaustion, because they can't really see clearly, they can't hear clearly, they can't communicate effectively when they are themselves stressed and exhausted all the time? So are there any your favorites that has worked for you, or that you have shared with other leaders and all these big corporations and have helped them?
So one thing that's so powerful for so many of my leaders is I tell every leader I coach they should have an RGA every day. And RGA stands for two things. It is a revenue generating activity
Yep.
because if I'm not talking about revenue, my leaders are typically for-profit organizations, and they're like, if you're not talking about money, then you're not talking to me. And so they need to have an RGA every day, which is a revenue generating activity every day, but they also need to have a rest generating activity every day. So every day they need to find a space to rest. And here's the thing for many people, they hear rest, they think sleeping. You all, sleep is not a reward. Sleep is a necessity. So
Necessity,
stop
yes.
rewarding yourself with sleep. If your reward is sleep, then that probably means you are not having a healthy relationship with sleep.
Yep.
Sleep is not a reward. So an RGA for me could be what's that thing that allows your mind to rest? It may be yoga. It may be working out. It may be going to a cat cafe. It
Yeah.
may be store
Music,
shopping. Whatever
walk.
it is, and it only takes 15 minutes of that thing every day. Now, again, it's like the marathon. I need you to get an hour of RGA every day. But if
Yes.
this is not, if sleeping is your reward, then you're probably at a 15-minute start. 15-minute RGA every day to just rest your brain. It is an organ, a muscle, just like your muscles. You would not sit and do pull-ups all day, every day.
Yes.
Why do you make your brain work on hard thinking all day, every day? At some point, it is not thinking well. It needs to rest as well. So an RGA every day, revenue generating activity and a rest generating activity every single day.
I love it. I love it. And that could be our taker from the episode, I guess. I love to give people some small takeaways that they can go, but they need to remember about the RGA and, the revenue generating activity, or for your sake, if it's not revenue, whatever it is, but rest generating activity. You need to invest in yourself. I keep telling people, if you start counting how many hours you have in a week, in a month, it's crazy how little time we give to ourselves. And we're constantly running and doing that, and we're not taking time to rest and rejuvenate, and that's very, very important. So is there, shifting that to one quick another thing, is there a small shift or phrase you personally use that helps disarms defensiveness in high stake moments, when how to talk and listen actually counts the most?
Yes. For me personally, I tell myself you have time.
Yes, I
Because
love
when
it.
we're in conflict, we give ourselves a false sense of how much time we actually have. We think, I mean, we see it all the time when our phone rings. We feel like we have to immediately, even if we don't answer, we have to look at it. Why?
The
You
ding,
knew,
as soon as the
you,
ding comes, right?
yeah, you knew you weren't going to answer the phone when it rang.
Yeah,
Why did you look
yeah,
at it?
yeah.
We feel, and then we get anxious. Okay, I saw a text come in. The text isn't even that
Who this
important,
is
but
from?
I need to respond. I need to respond. Especially, oh my gosh, as parents, as a mom, if I see
Yes.
my child text me, I can see that they don't want anything. Like my son is 18. If I'm out of town, mom, what am I having for dinner? I don't know. I am in Colorado and you are in Atlanta, and you're 18 years old. You're a senior in high school. You can work this out. But I get aroused and I'm like, oh, I need to respond to him. I need to respond to him and tell him I
Yes.
don't know.
Yes. A lot of
And I
urgencies we create are not urgent, right?
And so when we're in a conflict, what we tell ourselves is, I have to address this right now, and I don't have 30 seconds to think of a better response. I need to respond right now.
Yeah.
Instead, say, I have time.
Yeah.
That phrase alone is enough to bring your cortisol down, right? Get you calm, get that amygdala from being stop the amygdala from being hijacked, and bring that prefrontal cortex back online. It's the stress that keeps us in this aroused state that we're like, oh, I have to respond, and I respond this way, and now I regret my response. I have time. I
Yes.
have time.
That's
Now I
beautiful.
can think this through. For me, I tell myself I have time.
That's beautiful. And I have to mention this. I was listening to one of your interviews and I totally love it because of the inner work that I do. And you said, if you are a miserable employee, you will be a miserable entrepreneur. And that is so true because I keep saying that unhappiness comes from within you, not from something or someone outside of you. It is stemming from inside. So any special golden nugget for our entrepreneurial women today, listening today, or maybe somebody is stepping in, thinking of stepping into that world? Do you have any special something you want to say to them? Because, you and I both, I have started much later. You have been in this, space for so long and you started your own journey. Like, and you have shared many of your golden nuggets with me. So what golden nugget you would like to share with our audience today who are kind of stepping into that?
I would say the biggest nugget that I have is do it your way on your terms and be comfortable with the consequences.
Yeah.
And the consequences can be good or bad. This is such an arduous journey. It is tough, it is difficult, but it's so rewarding. So do it your way because everyone will tell you how it should be done, how they
Yeah.
were successful, what you should be doing, and recognize that no, if you have to do it on your terms, your way, with things that you're comfortable with. What I tell people, one of my favorite phrases that people love when I say is, you are damned if you do, you are damned if you don't. So pick the damned that you can live with. That's how your entrepreneurial journey should be. It should be picking the damned that you can live with because people are going to have something to say no matter what you decide.
That. Thank you so much for that. We have talked about conflict, culture, clarity, and what this, I think all of that comes down to the choice you're making and those small micro moments of action that you're actually taking for yourself and you're being intentional about it. So you can actually start showing up from within you. And that's how I say you activate your boss brain. So, Dethra, if you could leave our listeners with one action, one micro shift that they can take today, what would that be?
I'm going to leave them with two. The first one is, when the first time you're in a conflict, remind yourself you have time. Don't rush to take action. In that time that you have is my second step. Use the DARE model. Go through your mind, describe, acknowledge, review, engage. Describe, acknowledge, review, engage. And through that process, starting small, you will find yourself actually beginning to navigate conflicts and getting much better outcomes than you have historically gotten.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that nugget. And thank you for being here in such a rich conversation. Oh my God, I can keep talking to you. But I think we have all learned a little more today about how to turn tension into clarity, how to be standing in your own truth in those situations and be your own audacious self. For anyone who wants to connect with Dethra, learn more about her work, or get her book, That's Not What I Said, we'll have all the links in the show notes. But Dethra, if there is anything specific you want to share, or where can people find you or follow your work, do you want to say anything to that?
Absolutely. So I am on Instagram, which there I am Dethra_Giles. That is DETHRA_GILES. But all of my employeepreneurs know, and if you want to find out what an employeepreneur knows, you need to follow me. I am Dethra Giles on LinkedIn. That's where all of my employeepreneurs should be. And for a deeper dive on all these topics, I also have a podcast, the Happily Ever Employed podcast, where you can learn all this information everywhere you get your podcasts.
Thank you again. It was a pleasure having you. And to everyone listening, remember your inner technology is your greatest leadership tool. When you regulate your mind, body, and emotions, you don't just react, you rewire. And literally, that's how your boss brain leads from within. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend or teammate who needs to hear it. And if you're ready to go deeper, you can join me in the 8-week Rewired Women journey where we turn these insights into practice. You'll find the link to sign up in the show notes along with all of Dethra's information. And you can also contact me at pallavi-jain.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay real, and keep leading from within.
So that's it for today's episode of our Boss Brain podcast. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes will win a chance in a grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 private VIP day with Pallavi herself. Be sure to head on over to her bossbrainpodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Pallavi's gift and join us next time.